Hello. Good evening. Just quick show of hands. Is anyone visiting TIFF for the first time? Welcome. And for those of you who have been here before, welcome back. My name is Elise, and I'm the Senior Coordinator of Youth and Community Initiatives here at TIFF. To begin, we would like to acknowledge that today's event is taking place on the treaty territory of the Mississaugas of New Credit and the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community. On behalf of TIFF, I would like to thank our lead sponsor, Bell, our major sponsors, RBC, L'Oréal Paris, and Visa, and our major public supporters, the City of Toronto and the Ontario Arts Council. As a charitable organization, we would also like to thank the Slate Family Foundation, Janice Rotman, and TIFF donors for their support of TIFF community outreach programming. So I just want to tell you a bit about our community outreach programming to provide context for this event and the conversation that's going to follow this screening. So through our community outreach programming, TIFF works to increase access to film experiences throughout the GTA. We work closely with a wide range of community partners, be they hospitals, libraries, shelters, peer-run groups, to develop programming that meets the specific needs, interests, and goals of each group. So this includes screenings and discussions that encourage deep reflection and connection to stories that feel relevant. We also offer hands-on filmmaking workshops facilitated by local artists. And workshops, for us, they encourage teamwork, skill development, and self-expression. A lot of this work happens outside of the Lightbox, but we do also organize group visits to see movies, tour the building and the film reference library, or to learn about careers in film. So we do a lot of professional development sessions with our community groups as well. And all of this work is grounded in film's capacity to connect and transform, to build community through sharing stories and creating together. We work with smaller groups to create intimate, authentic, and meaningful encounters. And being out of this building, this work isn't always so visible. So one of the reasons we organize this event is to invite you to share this work with us and to get to know it, get to know some of the collaborators that we work with. In my role, I've had the pleasure of working with adult and mental health groups. We partner with 10 inpatient and community-based mental health programs every year to organize around 100 events around the city. Whenever possible, we try to include and amplify voices of lived experience. So in 2016, when Dan and Margot was first released, we organized several community screenings with Margot in attendance to share her story. And this film includes scenes from St. Michael's Hospital, which is one of our regular partners, so it was really exciting for me to bring this film back to the inpatient mental health unit there, where it sparked a really lengthy, robust, and candid conversation among peers about the realities of living with schizophrenia. For me, it was a reminder of how powerful film can be in starting a conversation, and I hope that we can participate in that today too. It is my absolute pleasure to share Dan and Margot with you. This film was co-directed by Sosa-Sims and Jake Chirico. It received a seal of approval from the Muff Society, which is a feminist film community in Toronto, and I just want to share a quote from their review because I really like it. It says, "The purpose of this doc is to kick the schizophrenia stereotype right in the junk and remind us that there is always a person behind the diagnosis." Dan and Margot is radical, I think, precisely because it is ordinary and it tells a story, not the story. It does a deep dive into the individual experience of one young woman as she navigates life in the wake of a schizophrenia diagnosis. And it does so in a really holistic way. So we see Margot at a doctor's appointment, but we also see her trying to find a job, moving into a new home, looking for love, dancing with her friends, and finding her community. This film asks big questions about the nature of identity, shame, and recovery, but it does so through the lens of small, intimate moments. It's told by a close friend, Chloe, who puts herself into the film, and because of that, it feels really intimate and candid. It feels like we're hanging out with a friend, like with a close friend. So we'd like to welcome a couple of guests to today's screening, Chloe Sosa-Sims, co-director of Dan and Margot, and Anne Borrelly, a peer educator and support specialist who works with us to bring film screenings and workshops to the mental health unit at St. Michael's Hospital. They will join us after the screening for a conversation about the film, their experiences with our community outreach programming, and the power of a good story. So please stick around for that. And finally, I just want to provide a content note that this film does include mention of self-harm, alcohol abuse, and hearing voices with sexual content. So please check in with yourselves throughout and take care in whatever way feels good for you. So if you need to step out at any time, that's totally okay. So thank you and enjoy the film. I'd like to introduce our guests, as I mentioned at the beginning, Chloe Sosa-Sims and Anne Borrelly. So Chloe is a Toronto-based director, producer, writer committed to documentary and stylized filmmaking. Her work spans independent documentary, television, branded content, and narrative shorts. She takes on issues from crime to HPV, and she advocates for gender equality in the film industry through her work at Film Fatales Toronto. Her previous work includes 5 years as the industry programmer at Hot Docs, and she recently participated in the Union Docs Documentary Lab, RIDM Talent Lab, and the Real World Emerging 20 program for her new film on women in politics. Anne Borrelly is a peer educator who has been working at St. Michael's Hospital for the last 4 years as a peer support specialist. Anne is also a Wellness Recovery Action Plan, or WRAP, facilitator, who is trained in the United States as a Level 3 facilitator and has facilitated several WRAP and WRAP 2 groups across the city. Anne has also spoken at many conferences on the power of hope and is a stand-up comedian using her recovery journey for her material. She has been working with TIFF's community initiatives for the past 4 years and enjoys movies and musicals in her spare time. Please join me in welcoming them to the stage. Thanks. All right, so just a bit about how this will work. I'm going to start by asking a few warm-up questions to get to know you, and then we'll move into chatting about the film. So I'd like to keep the focus on mental health and wellness, and I'd like to connect some of the themes of the film to your experiences. So there will be some time at the end also for the audience to ask questions, so please hold on to those or think of those in the meantime. Does that sound okay?
Sounds great.
Great.
Sounds great.
So I wanted to start off with a few icebreakers. So I was hoping you could both share one thing you're really good at, one way you promote your own wellness, and if you were weather, what kind of weather would you be right now?
Do you want to go first, Anne?
Oh, sure. You want to get out of it, right?
Absolutely.
One thing I'm really good at, it's not answering questions. One thing I'm really good at is working with people from different backgrounds. I think that so it's one thing I really enjoy, so that makes it easier to be good at it. I think that's probably true. What was the second question?
One way you promote your own wellness.
I promote my own wellness by sharing my story, sharing experiences, and encouraging people to share their stories so we can learn from each other. I think that's the biggest teacher. If I could be one weather right now, maybe a little bit of gray fog and a little nervous about seeing everybody.
It's okay to be nervous. I'm nervous too. Okay, Chloe, one thing that you're really good at, one tool in your wellness toolbox, and the weather that you are right now.
Okay. I'm good at execution. I'm good at getting things done, which is sometimes to my detriment, I would say. What's the second? Oh, wellness. I've been singing a lot at home on my own recently. And in my head, I'm like, oh, I'm just prepping for karaoke. But I think it's just for myself, and it's been really nice. And weather-wise, I feel like I'm sort of like a humid day with rain showers coming down.
Interesting.
I won't expand.
Great. So maybe just to get the ball rolling, we talked earlier about sort of what we do at TIFF community initiatives and in the hospitals and around the city. So I'm just wondering, you both have been involved in that programming for quite a while in different capacities. So I'm hoping you could both just share a bit about those experiences and what that's meant for you.
You're trying to go first.
Oh, I thought this was you and then me. Okay. Yeah, so we brought the film, Dan and Margot, into various psychiatric wards, and of course Margot came with me as well. And we'd share clips of the film with different psychiatric patients who were struggling with different forms of mental health issues. And then I also would go in separately. I did a number of documentary workshops in psychiatric wards. So sometimes I would do a workshop on how to tell stories, how to retell stories. So we've done quite a bit of work together. Elise is amazing, by the way. She's really good at her job and really passionate.
Thank you.
We've had TIFF come in since I started at St. Mike's, so 4 years ago. And we've done, I'm going to ramble, otherwise you want to orient me more, but we've done everything from documentaries and ideas about how to tell our stories, to my favorite, which is the stage makeup or makeup artists that come in, and we always try and get them in around Halloween. It's a lot of fun. We've had some really fabulous ones come in. We've had many different people come in and work with us. I've worked in the community as well, and we created a photo book of people taking pictures, and we found out what happens when you give people cameras and let them do things and see things, and it was pretty incredible what people's visions were. And it's always fun because you announce it and you say, Toronto International Film Festival is here today. And you always get people going, really? They're here? It's like, yeah, come on, let's see what we're going to do today. And let's see what Elise has brought for us to do today. So I'm rambling.
Maybe, but I like it. Rambling is also okay. There are no rules or right or wrong answers here. I guess, Anne, maybe to that point, I'm wondering if you can tell us a bit more about your role as a peer educator and support specialist on the unit. So, like, what is a peer, and what is a peer in the context of mental health? Where are we seeing greater peer involvement, and why is this important?
So my role as a peer is to share my journey. It's actually kind of funny. I'm hired for the very reason I can't be asked why I'm good at what I do. I have a story, I have my own journey, and I've, as I said, been a RAP facilitator, taken courses and looked at my mental health as how can I share this in a way that will help other people see that there is hope, help other people see that there is a path to take, as Margot mentioned herself, meeting other people like her, meeting other people to help normalize her experience and what she'd been through. That's what I try and do every day on the inpatient unit. The idea is that by sharing our experiences, we can grow stronger together. We can see that there's more to life than just our mental health, because it does take over. It does become something very big, and we need a space to make it understandable and relatable. I think it's becoming more and more popular because more and more people are breaking the stigma and standing up and saying, this is what's happened to me, and this is what I've lived through, and this is what I'm living with. And people are becoming less and less ashamed, and I think that's a really, really positive thing. And I think by having film and coming into the inpatient unit, people are reaching out and finding different ways of expressing themselves, and it's one more way for them to do that.
And we get a glimpse of mad pride in the community in the film. And I wonder, to your point, Anne, whether you could talk about having Margot share her film in the unit and what that experience was like. How did it feel? What do you think participants took from that experience?
Oh, it was phenomenal. People, there's Margot, and there's another star from St. Mike's. There's Dr. Shelley Brooke, who's Margot's doctor, and people who had her as a doctor were like, wow. You're that progressive with somebody. Having Margot there, people were initially really surprised. Oh, it's you! Like, wow, this is really neat to have somebody come in and be a part of the film and actually come in and talk to us and share time with us. There was a lot of wanting to know more, wanting to understand more, wanting to see more. I think we did another screening and Margot was away again. She was doing her thing, and I know that people brought back the idea to me that she got to travel, she got to go places and do things, and she thought big, and that was one of the themes that's come back to me, people saying she didn't just stay here. Almost sort of an idea of despite whatever happened to her, she was going out to live her life again, and meeting her really solidified that for people.
Thank you. Did you want to add to that?
I was just going to say, I think when we first discussed introducing the film in the psych ward, we were concerned that it might be a bit of a trigger for people. But it was surprisingly like the opposite. Like people were just like so excited about Margot as like a symbol of hope. And, you know, it was something, you know, they thought maybe one day I can go to Australia too and, you know, meet somebody that I like and have like an independent life.
Doing her day-to-day, people saw that there was a day-to-day that could happen for them, that they could. There's an idea of getting on that recovery road and where will I be? And I think when you're in the hospital, you're in the most acute setting that you can be in. And to see somebody who has come through that and has moved through that and has really stretched and is doing things out in the world and have them right there in front of you is a huge source of hope for somebody.
Yeah, and just to pick up on that a bit, at Chloe, in the film, you mentioned that you realized that Margot would maybe like to connect with a peer herself, and you connect her with Seraphin, the artist, amazing artist who contributes to the film too. So maybe could you tell us a bit more about that decision and why you felt it was important at that time to connect her in that way?
Yeah, I wanted Margot to meet someone who had sort of a different perspective on her own mental health. Because Seraphin sort of saw her schizophrenia as sort of like a spiritual, creative, almost capability in a way. And I thought it would be really empowering for Margot to meet someone with a different perspective, but also to have like people in her life that have had similar experiences. Selfishly, I also thought Margot might become this like political activist, and the film would like take this turn where she'd be like out in the streets. Which didn't really happen. Like Margot's not really that political of a person, which is fine. But I think it did. I think it really did benefit her to meet someone who had had similar experiences to herself. I think it really helped her to move on in life.
And maybe different experiences too, like similar but different. And I think there's a line I really love in the film where, or just a moment where they're talking about, you know, I experience these like visual hallucinations, and for me it's like this, and then Margot's like, oh, that's really interesting, for me it's like this, and I think it's Seraphin who says like, oh, no two experiences are the same, and that for me is kind of the heart of the film too, like this idea that it is Margot's story, and as I said at the beginning, like a story, and I think that moment for me kind of crystallizes that too.
And I think that's one of the reasons we introduced her, is that we had this idea that we had to represent this like larger picture of schizophrenia. But then when we finally put the film together, we realized it's about Margot, and her individual story is going to be very different than other people. So I'm glad that that came across through Seraphin.
So Chloe, as a programmer, sorry, I know, don't look at all the questions, it's fine. As a programmer, a filmmaker, and an all-around film lover, what sort of stories most excite and inspire you?
I really like what documentary is doing now in terms of blurring the lines between fiction and reality. I think it's a really exciting time for documentary. So there's so many great films that have come out recently, like Shirkers. I don't know if anyone's seen that here. Robert Greene does really interesting things. And that they're very self-aware. There's a lot of transparency in them, and you can tell how the filmmaker is constructing the film. And I think that, like, I think there's something really positive about being more transparent about how you make the film. I also love really like absurd, like satirical films that don't tell you how to feel. So like anything by Yorgos Lanthimos. Like, has anyone seen The Lobster? Yeah, I love that movie.
Great, thank you.
Do you have anything you want to add to that?
I don't make films.
Oh.
You don't like films? After 4 years?
Not yet. I may, though. I may take your card and you'll see.
Well, Anne, I was wondering, I also have a similar question for you. So you're a storyteller in many ways, but also as a stand-up comedian. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to tell a joke or anything, though I would love for that. But what motivates you to draw from your own recovery journey and tell your story, and how do you support others in doing this?
What motivates me is a desire to instill hope. What motivates me is the desire to let others know that they may be in a place that for them is very scary, that's very difficult, that they might be experiencing things that they're really not comfortable with, but that it's ultimately okay, and that there is hope, and that we can make it through, and we can push through, and there is reason to be here. And I think that's what motivates me. How do I do it? With everybody, it's different. Sometimes it's sitting and listening, and I often say a luxury that I do have working at St. Mike's right now is time, and being able to spend that with people and listening, validating, just being empathetic and reaching out and trying to help them make themselves understood, both for themselves and to others. I think that's very important. Teaching strategies. Comedy is brilliant. I'll give a shout out to the MDAO who does the program.
Tell people about it.
It's called Laughing Like Crazy, and we take our experiences and we turn them into jokes, and it gives you a power over a particular situation that you may not have had power in the first place. It can give you space and time to look at something very differently that you didn't have time to look at differently in the first place. And it's a brilliant program, absolutely brilliant program. So anybody who is curious and wants to support people with mental health issues and wants to support them in a different way, try Laughing Like Crazy. Talk to the Mood Disorders. They always take donations. If you don't know how, ask me. I'll figure it out. But get people to look at something differently. It changes. That's what Dan and Margot does. It gets you to look at something a little bit differently, and helps you understand a little bit more what you didn't know before.
And I want to return to something you said about just listening and sitting with people and empathy. And I think kind of pitch that question to you, Chloe, because I know in the film early on you mentioned that one of the reasons you wanted to help Margot tell her story was that you didn't trust anyone else to tell it. And I just wanted to kind of unpack that a bit more and ask you what you meant by that. And maybe just address, because when we talk so much about storytelling and how powerful it can be, I think it's also important to address like the risks involved in storytelling. And so why, I guess, you felt like you might not trust someone else to tell that story.
I think I was extremely protective of Margot because she was a childhood friend and because she had gone through this experience. All of us were. Alex is here. She would have felt the same way. And so, yeah, I think that protectiveness went along while we were making this documentary. And it was interesting because I was making it with someone else as well, Jake, who was in the film. And I could tell that he, and this was good and bad, he wanted to push Margot more than I did, which at times was really beneficial because she needed to be pushed, but at other times I felt like I had to protect her. And I think, I don't know, I think that's like a case-by-case basis though for each film. Like, you have to be aware of your own sort of like moral boundaries. It's all like based on instinct and like your understanding of what's right and wrong and when it feels right and when it feels wrong. But in this case, it's like it's a different experience making a film about a friend because you do like, you know, like you don't want to, of course I didn't want to ruin my friendship. I wanted Margot to be happy and proud of the film and feel empowered by it, and which she did, luckily. But it was a huge risk for sure.
And I love that you're a character in the film and that you kind of watch your frustration and your group of friends kind of trying to make sense of their experience of the situation as well. And I think it's important that we see that kind of full landscape too. And did you want to add anything to the theme of the risk associated with storytelling sometimes, or how to do storytelling safely?
Safely. I think the story is beautifully told. I think allowing Margot to be the main character in her story, and she's very transparent during the story, and she's very open with the camera. The trust of a friend is obviously there, and that lets us into places where I don't think we would get to with anybody else behind the camera. I think that's beautifully done. It really is, to be able to share your story and to know that you're in safe hands. I know that creating a safe space is one of the things that I do try and do, and I think you created that for Margot when you made that film.
Thank you. That's really nice to hear. And I think it's been really well received in the mental health community, and I think I didn't realize that was what I was doing. I wasn't aware of that during the making of the film, but I'm glad that came across and that you could see that.
Just to expand upon that idea, before I flip it to the audience, I heard a really great question the other day, and I want to steal it and bring it here. But I was thinking about this line sticks with me from the film where Margot says, "I'm not here to be a symbol. I'm just here to speak and show." And I want to ask you both, either related to this film or not, what does authentic storytelling mean to you? Like, how do you get authenticity? What does that mean?
I think Chloe got authenticity in the film by creating that safe space. I think she may not have realized, as she said, that's what she was doing. But when you create a safe space for somebody, you create a space where they can be themselves and they can truly bloom. And I think that's what happened in this film.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like that's really important and something that we aspire to do in our work together too. And you see the positive impact of that for sure. I think did you want to add anything? Did either of you want to add anything before I throw it out to the audience?
I would say, just in terms of authentic storytelling, transparency. I mentioned that in terms of films that I like, but I feel like being really transparent about how you're constructing the film. And I tried to do that in this film to an extent, showing how I was constructing it and showing sort of the behind the scenes, I think can make it feel more authentic because the filmmaker is trying to show you their process. And I appreciate that as an audience member.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Any questions from the audience? It's really bright. Put your hands up really high, and then we have someone running a mic. Oh, there you go. Thanks.
Good evening. I'd like to know where Margot is now and what is she doing?
So Margot is in Mexico. She's living in Mexico at the moment. Basically, since she left for Australia, she has been traveling the world. She was in South America for a while. She comes back. Then she went to Mexico. Now she came back for a bit, and now she's back in Mexico, and I think she's going to Baja California after. So she's become sort of a world traveler. I think she plans to come back to Toronto eventually, permanently, but for the time being, like, I don't know, she really thrives in travel. Like, I think she likes to live fast and loose, you know?
Yeah, it felt like capturing lightning in a bottle when we were able to get Margot here for some screenings, because she was truly in between Australia and South America.
Truthfully, like, I think she's sort of over the film. Like, she's done this. Like, she's, like, ready to live her life, you know?
By the ocean. Any other questions from the audience? I think I see. Yeah, I got one over back there.
Hi. Were there any, like, deleted scenes that were, like, really important to you that was difficult to cut out of the film? And if there were any, would you want to, like, describe it kind of?
Great question.
There was a moment at her therapy session where she speaks to me and Jake, and she's crying, and she's worried about how she would be portrayed in the film and how she would come across. And I can't remember why we deleted it. It didn't seem to work in the final cut, but I felt like that was like it was an important moment in terms of this idea of like her awareness around this film being created, and her awareness of how she might be perceived by others. So I remember that was a really tough cut. Beyond that, though, I think most of the important stuff made it in.
Anything? Oh, I think we have one over here. Yeah.
Thank you. Watching Margot, the schizophrenic in this movie, let me put it in the form of a question. Was this typical for her? She was showing a lot of insight into her voices, her hallucinations, and ability to analyze them. Now, I realize that wasn't true all the way through, but she certainly came to that point. And I'm wondering how unusual or typical that is in schizophrenic behavior.
I don't know if there is. I'd be very hesitant to say there's typical behavior. Somebody who lives with schizophrenia can have as much insight into their illness as somebody who lives with bipolar or lives with depression. It's an entirely individual road to take, and I'm hoping more and more people recognize that. But I don't think there's a typical particular amount that I would say for any particular illness.
Margot also was no longer in the midst of her sort of like deepest psychosis. She was in recovery at this point, right? So like if we had filmed with her when she was in a very psychotic state, then it would have been very different. It probably wouldn't have been ethical and she wouldn't have had this much insight. But she's on medication and she was at a point of recovery, but still having occasional symptoms at that point.
Oh, a few more questions or comments in the front coming. Oh, sorry,
Hi.
There's one at the back first, and then we'll get to you.
Hi, thanks for showing this film and thanks for inviting us. This was wonderful to see. I just want to make a comment about the film itself, and something that I really appreciated was, I'm going to be very transparent. At first, when I heard Dan's voice or the interpretation of Dan's, I'm like, oh, it's going to be one of those films where they're going to try to portray schizophrenia from like using all this technology, and then very quickly I was absorbed into the story of it, and I think there's so many layers in the film that were really well done in both capturing this human being known as like Margot and her life, but also the experiences that she had, the conflict, and also how she's trying to make sense of it, and just the emotions that she was grappling with and her sense of identity. Like I've gone through psychosis myself, so I can appreciate the confusion that goes on through like in a person's mind. But I think you've really captured the experience really well, and I loved how you even just the way the film was distorted and the sounds, and it was brilliant. So thank you for doing this.
Thanks for your comment.
Thank you. That's so nice.
I think we have another one. Oh, yeah, right here.
I have a few questions. Where's her mom? Her mom obviously decided not to be part of it. Her dad did. How does she afford all this traveling and this lifestyle? And she's just a very likable, lovely, cheerful kind of a person. Yeah, I really liked her personality.
Yeah, her mom, we asked her mom if she wanted to participate, but her mother's a very private person, and while she supported the film and came to see the film, she's just not the type who would want to share private aspects of her family life. And in terms of money, yeah, I think she's extremely thrifty. She will come back and she'll work like a restaurant job for a while and save a bunch of money, and then she'll go somewhere that's extremely cheap and be able to, and she'll work in like a hostel or something like that, or she'll teach while she's abroad as well. She's done that as well. So she always finds a way to make it work. It's pretty, she's incredibly resourceful. She's very, very independent. It's actually unbelievable. She's really exceptional. And yeah, I love Margot too. when I was watching it, I'm not what I liked about watching it most was just seeing her. It just brought a smile to my face. She's just so, I don't know.
She's very magnetic. I'd say, like, even in all of the screenings that we did, like, she was just so laid back and funny and like charming and open and very receptive to having conversations, and like pretty difficult conversations sometimes, like not like outside of the film, and just like very patient and open to like just a warm person. So I'm glad you saw that. We have one here.
Yes, I'm very glad that you made the film, because I think your honoring of her and her relationship with you is the stunning part of this movie, and it's about relationship. And I wonder if you could comment on, I'm concerned sometimes about the media and documentary makers and filmmakers digging into the pain and staying there, as opposed to seeing the pain, honestly, and focusing on the hope and the resilience. So it worries me if there's not safe space for stories, that there isn't a balance of that. And I loved how you did that, how you allowed her to come through so strongly. So I just wonder if you could comment about the concern about staying only in the pain, and that's somehow sometimes what the media seems to want, or filmmakers want, and it's not fair.
Yeah, great question.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, like a lot of the films that have been made on mental illness very much sensationalize it. So like A Beautiful Mind is sort of like the classic example. And I think the good thing about this film is it's quite ordinary in a way, which also makes it much less exciting and much less entertaining, which I realize. But I think, I think we were trying to, I don't know if we didn't, in terms of the pain, I'm not sure if that was, I mean, we did go into the pain, but I think maybe it has to do with the fact that, like, I didn't want to push her too much, because I had this like sense of like, oh, I need to protect her. But I also do have a very cynical perspective of filmmakers and subjects, because I do feel like documentary filmmakers, including myself, kind of talk about how they're making this film from this like altruistic place, and it's to benefit the subject. It's never to benefit the subject. It's always self-serving. You're always doing it for your own art, or for your own exploration, or for your own creativity. But I think it can have good benefits to your subject, but you never know. You don't know. And I think that's another thing, like documentary filmmakers could be more transparent about the fact that like it isn't. Sometimes they have challenges with their subjects, which they don't talk about in the Q&As. And sometimes, a lot of the time, they want it to benefit their subjects, but it doesn't, you know? And I think that's a really difficult ethical issue with filmmaking, like documentary filmmaking in general.
Did you want to add something to that, Anne, just about the importance of like balancing the sort of the pain with the moments of strength, and like how do you hold space for the difficult moments and the tough stuff, but still honor and give space to the good stuff and the strengths?
I think you just did that. I think it's important to remember that people exist beyond their mental health issue, and that they have passions and loves, and that we can create a safe space when they need it. But that, in terms of film anyways, there's so much more to just doing a mental health film. And that's why this film works, because we don't just see Margot in pain. We see Margot doing what Margot wants to do. We see her struggling a little bit, and the dating thing's not going great initially, and we see that, and it's not focused on, well, it's not going great because she has this health issue. It's not going great because it's not going great. This is just one thing, and she's being very open about it. I think that's what makes a great film. And I think, we go back to real life, and again, creating that safe space is what you want to do. You want to create a safe space. We all deserve a safe space. Whether or not we have a mental health issue, we all deserve a safe space to be ourselves and have people who create them for us in our lives.
I agree. Yeah. Chloe, did you want to maybe just to return to the idea of that scene with the crying? I think we're talking about perhaps like the cathartic scene on the beach where someone is, or where Margot is kind of owning and trying to find self-acceptance. And it is, for me, I always love movies that hold both the darkness and the lightness. But for you, as a close friend, like sitting in this really intense moment of self-discovery and catharsis and reflection, like how did that feel? Like how did you feel about that?
I think it's very mixed, right? Because it's that you have your filmmaker lens where you're like, oh, this is great, she's crying, which is a horrible thing to say, but that is how you see the world. But then there's the other aspect of it where it's like my friend is in so much pain, but at the same time, I felt good about what she was letting go there. Like I felt like it wasn't just pain, it was like cathartic, like it was acceptance. Like we called that chapter The Exorcism because I felt like I honestly, authentically felt like she was like letting go of something, She was like, because she said in that moment, she was like, I'm finally able, it's been good for me to talk about this. And she said that as opposed to saying, oh man, I really wish I didn't do this film, or like, this is way too difficult, or like, I wish we weren't talking about this. Like, I felt like it was cathartic for her.
Any other questions? Oh, there's one over there.
I guess I just kind of wanted to thank you for making the film because I think it portrayed like a lot of truth in mental illness and stuff like that because though like now we're becoming more familiar with it and whatnot, it's still like a delicate issue and there's still a lot of truths that we may not know about it. And I think that what you created in this film and the message that you're trying to convey and that you did convey was impactful to everyone here, I think. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, okay.
I just want to say thank you to TIFF. It's been amazing actually getting the chance to watch this. We've heard about it for quite some time, but also we keep talking about the safe space, and this is obviously a safe space, but also I want to thank TIFF for creating the safe space that they do create within the community. Elise, you were just working with us 2 weeks ago, and we had an amazing time. It was such an incredible experience to be able to work with different people and find different outlets. And I think you really inspired a lot of us in different ways. And so to be here and seeing you as well is amazing. So thank you.
Thank you. That's so
Elise
sweet.
is really good at what she does. I have to say, she comes in and the authenticity and safe space that she creates is really incredible.
Thank you. But I would also say, and throw that back to you, that I think that this work only works because of all of the people in this room, like the people watching this film and engaging with this film and asking questions about this film, but also like the people doing the work in those communities to create safe spaces on that end that we can enter into and work collaboratively with, that are invested in putting in the work to plan something so that it can be meaningful and so that it can be, it can feel good and productive. So thank you to both of you and to anyone else in the audience who we've worked with. I think that feels, oh, I have one question over here. Sorry.
Hi, I just wanted to ask about the process. Just wondering if there were things you would have done differently or what you learned during the process, and if you have any advice for young filmmakers wanting to get into documentary making.
Great question. How do you start? How do you tell your story? How do you make your documentary?
It's hard. I mean, I think just do it. Oh, that's bad. That's Nike. Yeah, I don't know. I think you just you know what? Like, you just have to accept that, like, it's not, it might not be perfect, or you might not get funding, or it might not get into this festival. I feel like just don't have any expectations. Like, do exactly what you want to do. And if you have to put a little bit of money in it, that's fine. Don't go in debt. Do not go in debt for it. It's not worth it. But if you have to invest money in it, it's do exactly what you want to do. Do not let other people influence you and tell you, you should make it like this because it'll make it more commercial and better for broadcasters. Make a film that's true to you, because then if you go on and continue making films, you can start to like build yourself as an artist. I would say it's not a good career choice. If there's anything else you want to do, definitely do it. My parents are here and they can tell you how much it's been a struggle.
A labor of love.
But if you really want to do it, then you'll make it work.
I'd also say, just to add to that, like, find your community and find your crew too, right? Like you're inspired by collaborators and by people that you work with. I think this film is a testament to that. And those can be your friends. They don't need to be like professionals. And I think if you're looking for that community, we do TIFF Next Wave, just to plug, in February for young filmmakers. And there's like a whole industry component to that and a lot of really exciting, engaging film programming. So definitely look into that. But also places in the city like Lift, they run workshops on a whole range of topics, from like experimental film to narrative film and documentary film. And it's also just a really great place to meet people and borrow equipment and just try it out and find your style. So those would be 2 tips.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, there's a lot of, I didn't even mention this, but there's a lot of community as well. Like there's like the DOC Organization of Canada. There's Film Fatales. It's the collective directors that I helped to found in Toronto. And so there's lots of different, like, you know, try to apply to like talent labs. Like my friend Lulu's here, who's one of my best friends, and we met in a talent lab. And I think like just having like those friends around you who are also struggling is really important as well, because you're like in it together and it helps you keep going and you get inspired by those people too.
And a question here.
Hi.
Hi.
I noticed something that I think needs to be addressed here. I like what she did when she says, when I was 21, I wrote this as, I am schizophrenic. And then she says, I would never say that today. So a couple years ago, when I was at college, there was this issue about bipolar. I'm bipolar, okay? And there was other people being diagnosed because I was open about my diagnosis. I'm like, oh, I go off on tangents. Please let me know. And they would. And so they'd go, oh, that's the bipolar. And I'm like, I am not. The sum total of me is not bipolar. Part of the sum total, if you add this sum total, I'm a mother, I'm a daughter, I'm a student, you know? So I said that it is part of the sum total of who I am. And I think she brought that out, but I just wanted to extenuate it a bit more.
Yes, thank you. The whole person.
Yeah.
And we see that in the film. And I think, to your point, language matters too, right? And I think Margot feels that. And she kind of goes back and forth between how she kind of describes and owns her own diagnosis and what that means for her identity. And I think identity is another big theme of this film. So I thank you for pointing that out.
I'd also like to argue that as by the diagnosis, as a bipolar, as a person who has bipolar, I'm a creative genius. So it's not that bad.
Yes, preach. All right. We have one question here. Do we have a mic?
More of a comment, really.
That's okay.
I really love the part where
there's a mic coming.
Stated that,
if you feel comfortable.
she stated that everybody has mental health issues, whether they're diagnosed or undiagnosed. And I've been saying that for a while now because, okay, nobody's going to say it across the border. Trump. Whether you're in denial or professionally diagnosed, everybody has mental health issues. And I really, if people would acknowledge that and accept that, I'm hoping it'll be more funded and more appreciative worldwide.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, I think that's about all the time that we have, but I just want to thank everyone in the audience for sharing your stories and sharing in this work with us and letting us talk about the work that we do outside of this building. It's really surreal for me to bring that work and you people here too to talk about that. Like, I think it's strange and beautiful, and I really love doing this work. So thanks to you all for supporting us. Hoda here too. Big shout out to Hoda for helping so many people get tickets. Yeah, I know we feel really lucky that we get to do this. So thank you for supporting us in that, and thank you to our guests again. One more big round of applause for everyone. Thanks. All right, and I will be out in the area outside of the cinema if you'd like to chat more about the work. And otherwise, you can find more about it on tiff.net/learning, and then you look for the little community initiatives tab. But also just come ask me, and I can talk to you. Thank you.